Hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I'm Dr. Jaime G. Raygoza, a life coach, psychologist, and your host. Join me on a journey to inspire and transform ordinary lives into something special. Here, we celebrate the unicorns, those who choose not to follow the ordinary conventional path, but rather chase after their dreams and choose the path less taken, making them truly unique. Together, we'll explore powerful life coaching techniques and hear from special guests who embody the spirit of unicorns in their own way. What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, we have another unicorn roundup where we bring previous guests back on and talk about specific topics that will help y'all get a better understanding on the really hard things that we learn in life. So today, we're going to be talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. Today, I have three wonderful unicorns with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Savannah Hauk. I am a male to female dual gender individual. I live predominantly male life, but you get me today in my female persona. I do advocacy work. I am an author. I'm a podcaster. And what else can I tell you? That's about it. Yeah, I already feel just that list of resumes make me feel like an imposter. I'm gonna go ahead and let other people speak.
And can you tell us one new thing that you've learned recently?
I learned if you write long enough, you could just chop that book up into other books. So it'll feel like you wrote more books in the same span of time. So I'm feeling good about that.
Okay. Bracha Goetz. Right now I'm in Israel. I'm the author of 42 children's books and one memoir, a candid memoir for adults about my journey. Something I've learned. Right now, I'm reading a book called Vibrational Medicine. It's not a new book, it's an old book, but oh my gosh, it's so fascinating that's what's really interesting about it. I think it was written in the 1980s, and it's talking about what's just emerging. And so you feel the person's excitement. His name is Dr. Richard Gerber. He's a regular physician, but he's fascinated by all types of alternative medicine. And he's describing how the different vibrations, the different energy levels that we're not aware of, how we can become more aware of them, and how they can be utilized in our lives so that we could all live healthier and more joyful lives.
My name is Xochitl Morales. I work for a manufacturing company, so I'm the supply chain, but I've jumped from career to career. I have a lot of different hobbies. Again, jumping from career to career means I like a lot of different things. And I'm Latina, so I'm Mexican American. Come from parents of immigrants, but we've all been here. I'm 28 years old. My family basically has all their roots here now. Family, friends, everyone is here. And in terms of something that I've learned, so there's a lot of things because I've gone back into reading very heavily. One of the books that I'm reading, though, is about the Friends show. And one thing that I learned is that the character of Chandler was originally supposed to be gay. But they decided to go a different route, but they kept it in there anyway, just like that, those hints, and with the character of Phoebe as well, where they play a little bit with her own sexualities. I like learning that about the show that I really like.
No, I didn't know that. I guess that's something else I learned. My name is Dr. Jaime Raygoza, and something new that I've learned has been that I guess it has to be, don't focus on the suffer now, focus on the achievement later. So if you're training for something, if you're working on something, it's going to be icky. It's going to be a lot of suck. Like right now I'm training for a marathon. So every run, it sucks for me because I feel like I don't have the lung strength and the endurance. So as I push myself, it's going to keep sucking until I finally get to the point that I want to get. And then after that, you ride the rest of the way there. So embrace the suck now so you can redeem the rewards later.
You're really not enjoying the process at all?
I do enjoy some of it. And then I do feel like the runner's high, but I feel like when I push myself to the limit that I'm already at, that's when it starts sucking. Cause then it's like, my body's, what are you doing to me? I
Right.
can't breathe. Yes. So I
I
do
like
enjoy.
how I like how you went with something so motivational, and I'm here like, this is what I've learned because all I've done is read.
No, it's we all learn different things every time. That's why I love listening different things to everybody and what they've learned in their life. But so let's jump into the topic. So today we're going to be talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. And I think this is something that a lot of us have experienced at least one time in our life in one point or another. And this is something that a lot of the clients that I've been working with have been struggling with. So I thought it was an interesting topic to bring up. For me, imposter syndrome is when you feel out of place and you don't feel like you're good enough to do something. So I guess let's start off with, what is one thing that people can do when they are feeling imposter syndrome? Maybe you can talk about your own personal experience if you ever felt it, and then what you did to get over it. So, do we have any volunteers?
You may or may not know this is not how I appear in life. That my male persona is I'm biologically male, so I spend 90% of my life as a male persona in my gender. But in my duality, I also appear as Savannah, which ironically, I have more achievements under the Savannah belt than I do under my male belt, which is very ironic. So I've been dealing with probably something akin to imposter syndrome for my entire life. Like, how do I get accepted as this female version of it when I'm really a man? So it has taken me 50 some years to actually get to this point of self acceptance of really, and I'll say it to you this way. It's giving less F's. Basically, when you stop caring about what everybody thinks about you is when you start caring more about yourself. So once I realized that it's really not the validation from the outside that is the determinant of my worth, then I realized, oh, as long as I'm being my best me, and like you said with the running, right? Like it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck until it doesn't suck. So you keep practicing, you keep putting the effort in, you keep putting the like determination into yourself and whatever that is. And for me, it's both my writing and advocacy and as my parents and my gender. This is what I've had to come to terms. And I'm living in the South now. I don't know. Nobody knew that, but I came from Detroit and New York and now I'm living in South Carolina. So that is very much a not necessarily super liberal accepting state. And I've become more visible here out in the world in South Carolina than I ever was up north. It's like you have to hit that suck. And once you like step over it outside the comfort zone, you realize, oh, like it's not as bad as I thought. And people are more accepting. And I accept myself. And all of a sudden it's this kind of whirlwind of external validation, internal validation that really brings to bear the worth that you need for yourself.
I think when I felt the most like an imposter, when I was at Harvard and I was doing really well. I looked very successful on the outside. And then I went on to medical school and again, looking very successful. It was probably the most miserable time in my life. What I found, at that time, I had food addictions that nobody knew about. So, like with all addictions, they're secret. And the behaviors were getting more and more bizarre. So I felt always like an imposter. Nobody knew who I really was, what I was going through. And what changed all that was recognizing that the real me was invisible. The real me was a soul, and that this is a costume. And that really changed things because then I finally started to nourish my hungry soul. That's the part that was really hungry. Once I started to do that, I no longer felt like an imposter. That's when it really evolved and changed.
So for me, introduce myself by talking about how I've jumped from career to career, right? And every time that I jumped into something, it was something that I knew nothing about. I jumped into mental health and I probably shouldn't have been there at the beginning, especially at the beginning. So I was very obviously feeling like the imposter where everybody could see, I felt like everybody could see I knew nothing. I was lost. And every time that I stepped out of that role, I would look back and I would think, oh my gosh, I did amazing. While I was there, I felt like every day, if my boss called me into the office, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired today. That's just how I felt every single day. So I think when anyone is trying something new, it's always going to feel like you're an imposter when you're trying to pretend that you are okay. You're going to feel like an imposter. And I came to that realization that if in this new role, I went into it and I said, okay, one, I'm going to appreciate the good things I do when I do them, not in retrospect. So I try now. Like I really do try to sit down and say, okay, this was good. Celebrate it, right? And then the second thing is just going into it and straight up saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me, please. And I've come to see that everybody will say, okay, yeah, you're right. I don't know how you got here, but let's do it. There's got to be some reason you're here. And people will help you and you stop feeling like an imposter because you're not trying to pretend that you're not drowning because it feels like you're drowning sometimes.
Yeah, I completely love that. And I think vulnerability goes a long way when you are doing something that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest thing to do. For example, when I started this podcast, I did not know anything what I was doing. And I was like, who's going to want to listen to me talk for about an hour? Who's going to want to come on to my podcast and actually have a conversation with me? And it took me a long time. It took me about a year of me trying to get over myself in order for me to actually launch my first episode. And I remember recording the first episode, I decided I was like about to hit publish and I was like, I'm going to delete it. No, this is not something I want to do. It's not. 3 seasons later, here we are. But
Wow.
you definitely get into your mind is a very tricky thing. It will tell you so many things because it feels that you're in danger. They're like, oh, don't do that because that's scary. It might be harmful, but it's a little counterproductive in that sense. Is there anything that has worked for y'all that has shut that little voice up?
I can definitely understand the podcast thing because I also didn't know anything about podcasting before we started producing a podcast. And it was also very much East Coast, West Coast. We get together, we do recording. I had no idea how to edit. I had no idea how to publish. I didn't know anything, but being the more technical of the two of us, I got roped into it, I guess you could say. And that's fine. But it was just something I had to learn. I had to just take those steps. And you find your brain, like you said, will procrastinate because it doesn't want to venture into the unknown. Even it's simplistically as, oh, how do I edit this audio segment? It seems super simple in retrospect, as Xochitl's saying, but when you haven't done it that first time, it's so terrifying, no matter how minor it is. And I think if we give ourselves the allowance to be vulnerable, and we give the allowance to just try it, fail, and I think our brains don't want us to fail and feel rejection, either internal or external. That it's so easy for us to say, I just don't want to feel that feeling because that's messy. So I'll just not do it. And that way I'll feel better about myself.
I think one of the things that has helped me is I don't want to say everybody should do this, but it's almost going into survival mode because if you give yourself no choice, you have literally no choice but to do it and survive and come out on top. So sometimes if you're feeling like, hey, your voice is telling you can't do it, you're not the right person to do this. Hey, you're here. You have that video ready to upload. You're in this role. It's you or no one. So you do it or you do it, or you step out completely. And sometimes you don't have a choice but to do it, right? And sometimes that means whether it means I need to make more money, I need to help more with advocacy, someone's got to do it. And that's where you don't give yourself a choice anymore and you go into survival mode. That's the only way you're going to come on top. And again, not everyone should go into survival mode because that can produce a lot of anxiety, which is exactly what imposter syndrome is. But I think it's switching the anxiety into a different type of strength almost, if that makes sense.
And when I was a kid, we learned it differently because I hear survival mode and I'm thinking of trauma responses. For this, I see it more as necessity is a mother of invention, is the way we've always heard it. Where you have no choice and you have to figure it out and you will invent the best way in your mind to do it. Even if it's the worst way, in the most complicated way, you'll do it. And then I'm able to tell you 3 seasons in, you probably come up with a lot more, I don't know, easier ways of doing things, a lot more efficiencies. And once you've done it enough times, all of a sudden you are the expert.
Oh, yeah. And you learn different things and different methods that even other people don't know about, that you will then end up teaching other people about, that you're like, oh, I mastered this way. And people are like, I never thought about that way, because you're figuring it out. You try something new, and that's how new methods come out.
Through what you're saying, through your actions, you learn to trust yourself more through these experiments that you're doing in life, and you learn to trust the world more. The fears that we have come from a sense of scarcity. There's not enough. And as we disprove that, and as we recognize the abundance, then we begin to trust more in ourselves and in the world.
Yeah, I do like that. I think that it is in a way that we feel like we're not enough, or what we're doing is not never enough. Like, I remember when I became my first supervisor position, I would overcompensate and try to do more than what was needed for me, because I felt like what I was doing was never enough. Like Xochitl, I felt like I always had to have my box ready and packed in case today was the day that they figured out that I don't belong here and I need to like pack my stuff and leave. And it's a scary feeling to be living your life every single day like that, where you don't feel that you belong and you don't feel that your contributions are valued. And I think this is why it's so important for us as peers to be give acknowledgement every now and then also to yourself. Like, something that helped me a lot, I used to look in the mirror and tell me, you're enough. What you're doing is sufficient. And if they don't like it, they will tell you something. If they haven't told you something, assume everything's okay.
I just want to say one more thing on this, because what you said reminded me. So I've been going through a long week and long month. As I told Jaime, like, I've been at work like 15 hours a day every day this week, and we had a 4-hour work week. So that, yeah. So I was there from 6 to 7 yesterday, right? So there's a lot that I felt like I had to overcompensate for, and that's why I was there. But at the same time, it was also my project this week. And one of the things that I think helped me is also not taking things personally. I had a situation during this entire project where somebody that I admire and was a mentor basically told me I wasn't doing enough. I came to the realization, like, and at first I sat at my desk afterward and I was ready to cry. That whole day, the rest of the day, like, it was a bummer. I talked to my sister. I went to go get some carne asada fries. I started telling her, and as I'm telling her, my own life started working. And he's been going through a lot too. That person who's my mentor, he's like overwhelmed, overworked. And all of a sudden I told my sister, I'm like, you know what? No, screw that. He took it out on me. What he said may have been correct, but the way that he said it was completely uncalled. It was just funny how in that moment when I was just venting to her, my mindset just completely switched, because I realized very quickly it wasn't me. Yes, thank you for the mentoring and the advice. Could have been given in a completely different way. And after that, I did become a little bit mad, more than sad after that. But then I guess in a sense I got over it, because I realized it wasn't a personal thing. So sometimes just remember, people go through their own stuff, and when they make you feel like you're not doing enough, it might not be for that reason. It might be they were trying to guide you and they just don't know how to communicate at that moment.
Empathy is a big thing that we all need to understand more of, because like you said just now, communication skills are not necessarily the best thing that people do. That's not their strength a lot of times. And this person may have a great communication skill set, but not when you're inundated, not when you're overwhelmed. There are things that they right now might be thinking, oh, I just realized the way I spoke to her probably wasn't the best thing. And there may be a conversation about that in the future. It's like the road rage analogy. I always say, it's everybody's cutting and weaving and going in front of you. And those things, I don't care, because I'm still going to get to my destination safely. And I don't know what their deal is, whether they're joyriding or whether they're stupid or whether their mother's in a hospital, whether there's a sick child at home. You don't know anybody's experience, especially when you're in a 1-ton steel box. So I just try to just let them live their lives and not get wrapped up in it. And it's a harder thing to do, to not take things personal. That is also a skill set.
I completely agree. And I do want to, Sochi, what you said is a good transition to what my next question was going to be. How do you feel what we do, our actions, impact other people's imposter syndrome? I've noticed that at kind of what I was on the other end of that spectrum, what's in Sochi's situation, where I told someone, like, criticism, what I thought was constructive criticism, and saying what you're doing is not working. You need to change it up because the what you're supposed to be doing is not, you're not meeting expectations. So what can you do to fix yourself? And she just shut down. She just said, I'm not good enough. This is not something that I'm meant for. And she ended up quitting and she switched careers.
Wow.
And she said it was because of what I told her, that I told her she wasn't good enough. And even though that was not my intention and that's not the exact wording, that's the way she implied it to herself. So I wanted to ask, how can we control our own actions to not enable somebody else's imposter syndrome? And how can we also assist them to get their head out of shut those voices down?
It's very normal. One thing to realize is that we all have an inner critic. When we recognize that, it's really helpful because everyone thinks, oh, I'm the only one with this voice putting me down all day. And it's such a normal thing. Okay, that's why I wrote the book, Don't Read This Book. It's written in the voice of that inner critic. So I want to explain to very young children about it, that they become aware that you all have this voice saying negative stuff to you all day long. It's really busy. The awareness of that is practically way more than half the battle. Just being aware that we all have this. I'm going to tell you, this book took me 30 years to write because I did not have the last piece of wisdom. I had the title, I had most of the book written, but the last piece of wisdom was missing. And that is that voice inside our heads. It's also a good thing. It's actually there for us to push against it. We all have it. It's like this. It's like a barbell. It's for us to push against and grow the muscles. And like you said, it doesn't feel good when it's too heavy and we're trying to lift this, but it feels really great when we develop the muscles. And that's what it's really about. It's like a personal trainer. The inner critic knows exactly what your weaknesses are, how to get you what you need to push it off and start to feel good about yourself. I forgot what the question was, and I don't even know what I'm answering, but that's what I had to say.
I want to leapfrog on that because Bracha, you said something amazing. We're always talking about our inner child. We're also talking about like how they're there to protect us, but they're also super hypercritical and they are always in our ear every second of every day. And I love what you're saying, Bracha, because of wisdom saying, yeah, it is a critic of yours, but if you treat it as a collaborator,
yep,
and not a critic, you're going to get a lot more positive outcome from it.
Yes, beautiful.
For me, one of the things that I've noticed, going off a little bit both of you and then the question a little bit too, because we have our inner critic, we know that when we're stressed, going back a little bit to that same situation, we know that when we're stressed, we're going to be criticizing ourselves more. And if we're in a position where we can mentor somebody, where it's basically a position of power, almost where you're a little bit on the higher end of the power side, if you're not careful with what you say to yourself, you end up taking that out on someone and making them feel the way someone made you feel at some point. So that's why it's important to listen to that inner critic and know when is my inner critic giving me advice, and when am I so stressed out that I'm just telling myself so many negative things and eventually explode and take it out on someone else. And if that does happen, honestly, apologize to yourself and apologize to the person that you might have treated in that way. And you can straight up do a group thing if you don't know when you've done that as a supervisor. Sometimes it's okay to do a team meeting and say, I was stressed. If, anything was said inappropriately, please let me know and we can discuss. Or anything similar to that situation.
Something that you said reminded me of a quote that I was told once. Insecurities are loud and messy, but confidence is loud and clear. So whenever you have that inner critic in your head and you're thinking about all these bad things about you, about yourself, and you're doing something, those insecurities are going to be shown really loud, especially if you're collaborating with someone. And I think that's when the mistrust or the miscommunication happens, because you're so insecure about whatever you're doing that you're placing that on the other people. If you don't trust yourself, then you'd end up not trusting other people around you. If you think that you're not good enough, then you're like, if I'm not good enough, why are they good enough? Or different, like you project it out to somebody else. So you need to just, like you said, shut those voices up and be like, I'm just going to trust myself and I'm just going to do the best I can. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And let's see what I can learn from it and get that perfectionism out of our head. It's not there's no point in it. We're all going to make mistakes. Just put yourself out there and let's see how the dice rolls.
And I think what's interesting about what you just said is that confidence is loud and clear, but confidence is also very quiet. Quiet confidence is one of the mainstays of how I present myself to the world as Savannah. So if I go out there very timid and scared and my body language is reflecting this insecure nature, it radiates out, it vibrates out to people around me, and they will see me in a very specific way as a result of how I carry myself. But if I carry myself with a quiet confidence of just another person in the world, they either don't notice you, don't have an opinion of you, or just feel that radiant confidence come out and don't feel threatened by you. Somebody who may be like, oh, look, there's a crossdresser or a gender diverse person, and I'm not really cool with that. But if you carry yourself in a way that is super confident, but not loud, like it's loud and clear, but it's not loud. And in that way, you just become part of the tapestry and people don't take it as a threat. So in my world, that's one of those things that enhanced confidence of self just radiates out the ability to carry yourself in the world.
I was thinking back to when you said that to the person that was under you. If you said it in a gentle way, it may have been really a blessing that they needed to hear, and that it was like a way to exit, that they are welcoming. But I'm wondering how you feel about it. Do you feel like you could have done it in a better way, or do you feel like you really did it in a good way? And that's just how it turned out. I'm just curious.
I said it in the nicest way I could have. And
Mhm.
this person was doing the same mistake. And I sat down with her and I trained her, I think at least
Right.
10 times. And I'm like a
Yeah.
person that I love to give a lot, more than 3 chances. And she
Right.
just wasn't getting it. And I even had her peer sit down with her and try to like teach her how to do it. And she just was not getting it.
Yeah.
And what I told her is like, and I think the same verbiage was, I don't know how else to teach this to you where you're going to understand it. Please tell me what you don't understand so then
Mm.
I can understand what you don't understand. If that
Yeah.
And she just shut down and started crying and said, if you don't think I'm ever going to get this, then I'm just never going to get this. And I think this is just my sign that I should leave. And I'm like, that's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is obviously what I'm teaching, my method of teaching you is not working. What
Hmm.
allows me to understand it is not the same way that you're understanding it. So talk to me so that I can work with you and teach you the way that you learn, because every person learns
Wow.
different. But I think at that point that narrative was already stuck in her head. And she was just saying, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get this. And I think it had to do more so on mindset than the actual skill.
Yeah. It sounds like you were opening as many doors as you could, and she really wanted to exit.
I think that shows a really strong character of what's the worst case scenario that could happen because of imposter syndrome, where you convince yourself that it is true and it's self-sabotaging to the point where you force yourself out because you feel that you're not good enough. Like, how do you get yourself out of that mindset? If like you're really that negative and you just like you hit rock bottom, like what can you tell yourself to get yourself out?
I'm looking at you with the DR in front of your name, and I'm like, I shouldn't be writing books because I'm not a doctor. I don't have a postdoctorate to talk about gender studies. I only have my life experience, the ability to do research, right? So I'm constantly, even the book I'm writing right now about gender identity is basically just my take on the world. So in that regard, I don't consider myself quote unquote an expert, but I'm an expert in my own life, and I'm an expert in being able to bring disparate data together in some sort of narrative. But at the end of the day, I'm always telling people in my books and my self-help books this is my opinion, and I'm just trying to raise questions in your mind. I'm not trying to tell you how to think. I'm just trying to get you to open up your brain pan a little to say, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. Oh, let me think about the world maybe a little bit differently and see how it applies to me. But in that regard, because I write that way, always thinking that I'm not good enough to write this material because I don't have 12 years of college education to back it up, that kind of thing. So in that way, I don't have the technical expertise to say I should be telling somebody this information. So I'm always there to the point of how do I get over that is unfortunately, this is now the external dialogue, people coming to me and saying, oh my God, what you said in your book really resonated. And that validation externally, while I don't have the doctorate or the PhD, I can say, wow, my words and the way I communicate was able to resonate with that person and do something positive in their life.
And I do have to premise that, like, those little two initials that I have in front of my name, oh my gosh, it takes so much courage for me to put it up there. Even though I did the work and I did the time to put it in, I always hesitate when I'm like, oh yeah, my name is Dr. Raygoza. I hesitate inside me. And I always feel like somebody's going to say, are you really? Or so I feel like somebody's going to tell me something about it or discredit me. And I gave up 7 times during my doctorate degree. I gave up 7 times. And I remember those specific times where I had a breakdown and I said, I'm just not good enough. None of my peers were Hispanic. Everybody else was white. And I was like, I'm young, I'm Latino, and I do not belong here. I don't look like anybody else in my class. And whenever people were talking about discussions and talking about all of these theories and stuff, I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know. I don't understand. This is not something that I'm familiar with. And I had to go through therapy. I went through a psychiatrist. I had a life coach because I needed other people to help me because I was so deep into my imposter syndrome that each time, I feel like each time of the 7 times that I gave up, I went deeper into the hole. And it was the last one that it was literally 1 month till graduation and I had given up again to the point where I was like, this is too much. This is too much. I have to write a 180-page paper. I just cannot do this. Even though I had all the information there, I'd done all the work, I did all the research, I had my mentor and everybody, but I was like, this is too overwhelming. I just can't do this. And I had a life coach who just said, just try. And at least you said, in your deathbed, you're not going to regret the fact that you tried. You're going to regret the fact that you had the opportunity to try and you convinced yourself not to. So she's just do it. And at least you could say, I gave it my best and I failed. And that's it. But you won't have that regret. And I tried and I got it. So it took me a long time to get that. So there was a lot of imposter syndrome in that itself.
It's interesting what you're both saying because imposter syndrome is so internal or we talk about imposter syndrome as if it's so internal, but the reality is part of it comes from external, whether it's our parents telling us we're not enough, some teachers telling us enough, whoever it is at some point plants that seed in our head that we're not good enough. And we always try to combat it only internally, and it's so important to combat it internally, but we forget how often it's those external factors that actually help us get out of that, whether that be, like, for me, one of the things that I notice and I appreciate is my friends and my family. I have 2 parents who are extremely smart, 2 siblings who are extremely smart and hardworking and good at what they do. I have my partner and I have my friend. And those people, to me, are all successful people who keep trying to pull me up with them. So the way that I think about it when I'm struggling now is, okay, I have people around me who are really good at what they do, who are really smart, who are caring, loving, funny, and they're still here with me. So I'm doing something right. If I'm keeping them around for a good reason, they're keeping me around for a good reason too. I don't know what it is all the time, but it's there. And so we forget how important those external validations can be. It shouldn't be the only thing, but it can be when you need it. And that mentioned my sister. That's who just venting to her helped me that day that I was about to cry. I texted a group of friends telling them this is how I'm feeling. And I got a bunch of support saying, you're doing great. You're a great person. They don't know what I'm doing, but they're there supporting me. And at least I know that I don't have to struggle with friendship. It's something that helps us out as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah, community is super, uber important, especially when it comes to situations or lifestyles or career choices that are not common or encouraged or accepted. And I found that my first TEDx, which I never thought I would have done until I started podcasting, who knew that would have been on my bucket list, that community, education, and advocacy are the 3 pillars of self-acceptance. And if you can't accept yourself, and it's very hard if you talk about Maslow's pyramid of self-acceptance, and I know that's a Western culture thing, But, the idea that like we need all these things at our base of foundation in order for us to achieve beyond ourselves and feel love. Imagine doing that without the support, without the community, without the validation externally, and still trying to bring yourself up from your bootstraps internally. Like you said, Shochi, it's not easy to just do it on your own in a vacuum. But if you can find a community of like-minded people or allies who support you, or people who don't understand what your job entails, but know that you as a person are capable and amazing and intelligent, those are those things that we need from time to just the rising tide raises all ships. And you need that in your life in order to feel that you're not drowning.
Yes, I completely agree with all of that. And I think community is such an important thing. And even people that don't know what you're doing will support and still support you, I think is super, super strong. And I've had friends where we all think that we're better than each other. Like my friends are consistently telling me, I don't even know how you do everything that you do. You're such an amazing person, blah, 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 blah. And I'm over here thinking like, this person is like a mom. She works full time. She has her own business. She has all these things. Like I have over here this other friend that like is living on her own, is doing all these things. And I'm like thinking, I'm in awe of all the people around me. And then I always get shocked when they tell me about me and they think the same thing about me. So I think when you always think that you're always going to think that people around you are good. I think, but as long as they all support each other and you all bring each other up, and like what you said, you all thrive together. I think it really does help you shut those voices out, especially because sometimes you need to hear the little compliments. And if you really want to know who you are, ask the closest friends that you have to say, what do you think of me? What do you think are my accomplishments? What do you think how I am? And listen how they will describe you in a way that I don't think you can even describe yourself.
Yeah, I think part of getting over imposter syndrome is getting over the feeling of disconnection. That's why people add connection to our lives. It's that feeling of separateness and estrangement, the ego that we're by ourselves. It's all on my shoulders. Who am I? And the more we recognize that we are all connected, it takes away that whole sense of that ego aloneness, and it takes away the competitiveness. We just sense that overriding connection between all of us is one of the greatest healers for the imposter syndrome, because we're no longer fighting this separate battle alone.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree. And back to your comment earlier about feeling like the other person's better than you, that what they're achieving is beyond what you can achieve. And I think that's something we've become anti-tribe. We've become very individualistic in the last couple hundred years. We're not living in a tribal society. And as a result, you don't have the hunters, the gatherers, the nurturers, where everybody had a role and everybody excelled at the thing they excelled at. And it brought harmony to the whole of the tribe. Because we're all individuals, every day we look and say, oh my God, look at what they're doing. I could never do that. Oh my God, look what they're doing. I could never achieve that. And we forget ourselves in the place and our strengths of who we are, like as a creative. And we all have a creative, I think in this group, we all have a creative streak. And creative is very subjective about who likes what you're creative about. But I think that we lean into that strength of who we are and harness it. Like individualistically, that's our strength. That's what we're good at. But when we start doing it as a competitive analysis against everybody else around us, where it's like, oh, what my contribution is not as good as somebody else's, then we don't believe in ourselves because we see what they're doing as better, more important, more successful. But if we look at it more holistically as a people, then we realize we're all bringing to the table something that's needed, warranted, loved, wanted, and important. And if we start thinking more that way, all the tribes of the Americas and Africa and Middle East and everybody was very much a group as a whole and not just nomads living life and trying to succeed on their own.
Yeah, I completely agree. And instead of doing things separately, you need to be able to do it as a group. And there's certain things that you do alone and you have to do alone, but you're doing it alone doesn't mean you can't have your group of cheerleaders and friends and everybody around you to help you along the way. And the way that I think about this, not to be cliche and going back to my running analogy, but when you're doing a marathon, you have people along the way with water stations, with granola bars, with the pouches, helping you, giving you what you need to finish your race. You're not doing it all by yourself. There's people around you in every single step, every single mile, cheering you on and giving you stuff to be able to help you go. And there's nothing wrong with getting help. I think a lot of it comes from, I need to do this on my own. I need to succeed on my own because if not, I'm weak. I'm not good enough. This is not, but the most successful people have had help and people in their pockets to be able to help them push them up. So as long as you admit that you're only human and you're limited based on what you know now, you're going to get through it. Just ask for help. And in the future, you may be the one helping somebody else achieve their goal.
Something that you said right now triggered another thought. You said we feel like we have to do it alone, right? When it comes to, I mentioned at the introduction, I'm first gen Latina Mexican American with parents who are immigrants, right? Or who came here as immigrants. I think amongst Latinos and first gen, we struggle so much with feeling like we have to do it alone because our parents got here, they did it alone, right? It seems like they did it completely alone. They thrived or survived or both and raised families here when, again, they, like with my career, they had no business doing all that. When we come in as the kids of those immigrants and we feel like we have to do better. And the reality is we have to do better because they gave us that support. Hopefully they gave us that support, right? So we can use that resource that they gave us. But at the same time, our parents didn't do it alone. Sure, my parents don't really have siblings here, but most of my childhood friends or their friends are because my parents were friends with them. So they built a community here. So we feel like we have to struggle. We feel like we're not doing things right because we should be doing better because I have more resources. And sure, we should be using those resources better. But our parents didn't do it alone. And I think that's where a lot of first gen struggle with imposter syndrome. We have that voice inside of us always telling us it's not enough. You're not proving that your family deserves to be here. I don't know where I was going with it, but it was about.
Yes.
It's very much true. It's trying to generationally trying to do better than your predecessor. I'm not first gen, I'm third gen, I think. But coming from a lower middle class family where my dad was constantly working 6-7 days a week, putting food on the table. And yes, I was afforded the ability and the luxury of going to college and getting a career that was not so manual and work with my hands as much. So I'm very happy that I had my parents' tenacity to keep going. But then I look at like how hard my dad worked and go, I could never work as hard as my dad worked. So even though I'm sitting at a desk in an office for 8-9 hours a day, it doesn't seem like it equates to the effort my own parents put in raising us. So yeah, it is a weird generational gap analysis that we need to do, separate ourselves from what they did to thrive or survive, like you said, or both, versus what we are doing. And that is individualistically. It's not a comparison of what they acquired or able to put together for you or for the next, but just focus on what you are contributing. Then your kids, the people coming after you are going to look at you and say, wow, look at everything she did to like all her careers, her 27 careers that she had. It was amazing. I could never do that. So we're constantly going to be like always falling short somehow, some way until somebody else's eyes are looking at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's never going to be enough for us because we always want what we don't have and we always diminish our things. I think it's a little bit of where you hear those stereotypical older generations say, oh, back in my day, I had to work all this hours and blah, blah, blah. You have it nothing now type of thing. But we do it reverse where we're like, oh, they did it. They did all this stuff. And that means my achievements are nothing compared to theirs because they had to struggle more. And it's not a struggle race. It's not a struggle. Who struggles more is the most successful. It's whoever reaches that level of happiness and comfort that they want in life where they're like, I'm good. And success is different in every person. So every person has a different level of success. And we just have to, in the nicest way, we need to mind our own business and stay in our lane for that and say, what is success for me? And how am I going to do this? Stop comparing ourselves with somebody else in order for us to define what our success is. Now, we are running out of time in this. I can probably keep going for another 2 hours on this. But I do want to go with the last thing, which is if you have one piece of advice that you want everybody to leave with today, what would it be? And to give you some time to think about it, I'm going to go first with mine, which is something that a friend of mine told me for my marathon. So he said, the only way you're going to be a runner is if you start thinking and acting that you are a runner. So put out your shoes, put out your gym equipment in front of you every single day so that when you first thing you wake up, you see it, you put it on and start doing it. If you don't get the tools, if you don't get the thing like the schedule and everything out and start acting like you actually are the thing that you're trying to be, you're never going to become it. Because I always said, oh, I'm training for a marathon or I'm training to be a runner. And they're like, no, you are a runner training for a marathon. Change your verbiage, be the person that you're trying to be, and always think, this is what runners do. So I am a runner. It's not that I'm trying to become a runner. I am a runner. And that changed my life and my bright trajectory. And now I'm out there like running with other people. And I'm like, I'm part of them. This is my new identity that I adopted, and I'm not lesser or more. This is just me.
I'm going to pivot off of that with my own analogy. And it's a creative analogy because I get this a lot from other people, which is like, oh, I could never write like you do. Successful, self-success or not, like I'm not top 10 New York Times. I probably never will be, but that's not really my goal in life. It doesn't define my success. I'm happy to be a creative. But I hear that all the time, like, I can never write like you do. Writing in and of itself is a multi-tiered discipline. Like you can be a poet, you can write songs, you can write essays, you can be a blogger, you can be a novelist, you could be a nonfiction writer. There's 50 flavors of writing. If writing is in your heart, it doesn't have to look like my writing, and my writing doesn't have to look like your writing. It just has to be what is going to be that thing that dances off your fingertips and whatever makes you happiest. Like you said, your own sense of happiness for what you're achieving, I think is probably most indicative of the thing you want to become. And again, for me as a creative, and I think as some of us can agree, it is about that discipline. If I could never do it, I could never write a 1,000-page book in my own goblet of fire. Okay, great. But if you start today for a half hour, and I don't care if you write 3 words or the title, or if you do 5 paragraphs, or all of a sudden you come away going, wow, the half hour turned into 3 hours and I have 10 pages. If you go back and you look at it a year from now, you're going to have something that you didn't think you could ever achieve on day one. So like the marathon running, I think that is the most apt analogy, is that you do the work, you do the messy work, you stay disciplined. And when you come out at the end of it, or you look back from any point in time, you're going to realize you have something of substance, either created or being created. So if you keep true to that, and that is in your heart to do that, to be that thing, then you will achieve it in whatever measure is measured.
So back to don't read this book. The way the inner critic gets us is by getting us to focus on what we're lacking, always missing things. We're always lacking things. So it gets us to focus on that. And then we feel like an imposter. And then we're comparing ourselves to someone else. This is how it works universally. And what's the way to counteract that? To be grateful for what we have right now, to open our eyes and recognize the abundance of goodness in our lives right now. And then we're not focused on what we're lacking. And this goes on all day long. And this is what we could do all day long whenever you're feeling like an imposter. That's it. Just fill yourself up on gratitude. That's what nourishes our hungry souls. That's what gives us fulfillment.
So close to what Bracha was saying, I would suggest celebrate now, not in retrospect. Either way, you're doing something and you're doing your best. You might fail, but the reality is that that thought is only making you do things slower and with a little bit more anxiety. So when you do something well, and whether it's something so tiny like learning how to use Excel, how to use a function in Excel, or it's something major where you helped save a life, I don't know. celebrate it now, because at the end of the day, you did it. You gave yourself no choice but to do it. And if you don't celebrate it now, you're going to spend your entire life only looking back, never being in that moment. And that imposter syndrome is going to continue to get you if you don't start combating it with seeing the good things that you're doing now.
Yes, I completely love that. Thank you, everyone, so much for all of the tidbits. This is feeling so inspired right now. So thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. So as always, if listeners are interested in reaching out to you, saying hi or asking a question, how can they do so?
At LinkedIn, that's the place where I respond the most, and it's now private. So LinkedIn, look at my name, I'm there.
LinkedIn is best for me too, actually. Or the Goetz Bookshop. That's my website.
I'm also on LinkedIn. That is my professional side. You also can find me on Facebook, Instagram under Savannah Hauk. That's Hauk with a U. Also, you can find the Fox and the Phoenix podcast, which is my podcast. And you can find my books on Amazon, the Living Cross-Referencing series. And what else? And if you want to find all that information in one place, just go to livingwithcrossdressing.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for listeners, quick reminders, if you go to the Unicorn Wall of Fame, you'll see all these wonderful individuals in there with their bios and the episodes they came out in at my website at raygoza-consulting.com. Also quick reminder, episodes come out every Friday at 7 a.m. And don't forget to leave us that 5-star review. Thank you, everyone. It's been an amazing time. And until next time,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone. Great meeting you.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I truly appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep growing. Until next time, this is Dr. Jaime G. Raygoza signing off.